What's up, tea sippers? Don't taste test your teas before watching this video where we're gonna talk about 6 different factors to help you dial in that perfect comparison. My name is Dart from Teaware, and high quality tea, whether loose or powdered, is just gonna be a bit different than tea bags. The main thing you need to know is instead of brewing tea in a mug and just leaving your tea bag in, what we're gonna do is increase the total amount of tea and decrease the amount of water. This provides for more potent and more delicious tea. Factor number 1 is gonna be tasting alone first, then tasting side by side. Many people will tell you the best way to get good at knowing tea is by trying a bunch of different types of tea, but that doesn't mean you can't taste test if you haven't had a number of different teas. When you haven't tasted a tea in a long time, or you've never had that tea before, you wanna wake your senses back up to the taste, the smell, the aroma, the feeling that that tea gives you. Even if you want to compare several teas, don't brew them side by side. Instead, drink that first tea for 2 to 3 sessions. And when I say 2 to 3 sessions, I mean a full gongfu session of 5 to 10 different steeps. So whether that tea is good or bad, you're getting an idea. How long does this flavor last? Where is the flavor in my mouth? And you can use that as your starting point. Factor number 2 is you need a scale. Controlling your variables is the only way you're gonna effectively be able to taste test teas. Over time, you may be able to develop an intuition, but we're gonna have a caffeine video coming out soon, thanks to the inspiration from James Hoffmann on coffee.
Ultimately, what my guess here is only gonna reinforce the fact that I don't think you as a consumer can easily tell the caffeine content based on tasting it, which I think is really interesting and actually really important. It's time for the results, please.
So when you're using your scale, how much tea exactly are you gonna use? Well, for your standard test, most teas are gonna say 5 grams per 100 milliliters, and that's a great place to start. So just start there, and then we'll talk about later when we're gonna do it a little bit different than that traditional 5 grams per 100 mil. The scale is just one variable. Other things you're gonna wanna keep consistent are the steep time, the type of pot you're using, the material and the clay of the pot, different temperatures you're steeping at, and the temperature you're tasting at. Factor number 3 is brew and overbrew, or steep and oversteep. This is a question I get asked a lot when people are talking about tea. What is brewing? What is steeping? It's just the amount of times that the leaves are sitting in the vessel with the hot water. In the case of gongfu, it's how long is it sitting in the pot. And when we're brewing with a mug, well, you're steeping or brewing the whole entire time because you leave the tea bag in, right? So when you're brewing, you wanna stick to that 5 grams per 100 milliliters. And we're gonna start with steeps of about 15 seconds of the water in the pot. When you're over brewing, on the other hand, we're only gonna use 3 grams of tea. We're gonna stick with 100 milliliters, but we're gonna brew it for a full minute. And we're gonna talk about why in a minute. Brewing gives you an accurate representation of what you would actually taste, which is why you only need to do it with 1 tea, because that tea is gonna be your baseline that will make the assessment, are other teas better or worse than that baseline? When you overbrew, on the other hand, you're highlighting the good and the bad things of that tea, making all of them easier to tell. The taste, the feel, the aroma, all those subtle things, making them a little bit more dramatic to help give you a better idea. So when you're overbrewing, I recommend doing it at least 3 times, and this is again when we're gonna start doing the side-by-side comparison. So you're gonna brew 1 tea, and then all the teas that you wanna try, you're gonna overbrew each of them for 1 minute, 3 times. You're gonna have a much better idea once you do that 3 times, but it's not just about the taste. Factor number 4, you're gonna wanna get yourself some glass. Glass pour cups are great because they're affordable, but it also allows you to see the color of the tea as you're steeping. But don't let the color fool you. It's not always representative of the strength of the tea. There are a lot of times where the tea still looks darker, but the tea has already fallen off and you're kind of getting into the point where it starts to get watery again. And the other thing that it's great for, though, is if you're brewing with multiple vessels, multiple teas side by side, you can decant into this, leave the tea in here, and then in a minute or 2, taste the teas right back to back. This makes sure you don't oversteep, right? Making it more consistent before you drink it. Now, ideally, you want to drink it at the temperature that the tea is supposed to be brewed at, so when you leave it for a minute, it is making the tea slightly less accurate to taste, but it's a limitation we're willing to accept to make sure that the steeps are consistent between multiple teas. Number 5, using teacups. These may seem tiny, right? 25 to 35 milliliters, but here's the thing. When you're tasting, at least for me, sometimes I can feel like I'm a goldfish. I go to take that sip of the first tea, I take the sip of the second one, I got distracted. If you put it in a tea bowl and you just chug that one, you're not gonna be able to remember. Whereas if you're using that 100 milliliter Gaiwan or teapot, that'll give you 3 different tastings in this. So you can taste one, taste two, taste one, taste two, taste one, taste two. And that'll let you go back and say, wait, I think this was different, was it? Go back and sip. Oh wait, this was what, Anyway, you get the idea. Also, if you get too tea drunk too early when you're tasting, you're not gonna have accurate representations of what those teas taste like. So having it in smaller amounts is gonna be better. Power tasting, very similarly to wine. Number 6, test in porcelain, drink in clay. Obviously, for the best possible comparison, you want the same size, shape, and ideally the exact same Gaiwans. And while this is affordable, it just can be a little bit boring. So if you wanna bring out your cooler stuff, just make sure that it's all glazed or porcelain. But one thing that I think some people get wrong is glaze is semi-permeable. It's a very, very, very small amount, but if you're talking about porcelain versus something that's glazed, some glazes do interact. It's not worth having just boring Gaiwans or pots just to have the exact same. But the main thing with the porcelain is you're not gonna get a change in flavor. Because it has a more consistent pour and steep time, it also makes one less variable. Check out this video on how to pour a teapot in Gaiwan to get more of what I'm talking about. Also, cleaning out your Gaiwans, dumping them, and getting into the next tea if you're churning through a lot of teas is just easier with a Gaiwan. In the next couple weeks, I'm gonna be starting to post tea reviews, and I just bought a caffeine analyzer to see